The morning started like any other on Earth. The sun shone brightly over the sprawling cities, and the hum of daily life carried on as usual. People were rushing to work, children were heading to school, and the world seemed at peace. But in the blink of an eye, everything changed. The sky above split open with a deafening roar. What looked like cracks in the very fabric of space appeared, and through those cracks, massive ships began to descend. These were no ordinary ships. They were gargantuan, hundreds of miles long, covered in shimmering armor and bristling with weapons. The alien ships hovered ominously above Earth's major cities, casting long shadows across the land. Within moments, every news outlet was broadcasting the same terrifying message. The Zorath Collective had arrived. The Zorath Collective was an ancient alien empire that had conquered countless worlds in their quest for domination. They were known for their advanced technology and cold, calculating ways. But what made the Zorath truly terrifying was their eye-controlled army. Every soldier, every ship, every weapon was directed by a ruthless, all-knowing artificial intelligence that cared for nothing but total control. And now, they were here. As the Zorath ships hovered above Earth, they unleashed their most devastating weapon, an orbital bombardment designed to wipe out entire cities in seconds. The first blast hit New York City. A blinding flash of light filled the sky, and within moments, the iconic skyline was reduced to rubble. Explosions rippled through the city, sending shockwaves through the ground. Within minutes, the AI's bombs rained down across the globe, devastating Paris, Tokyo, London, and every major city in between. Earth's defenses were no match for the onslaught. Fighter jets were torn apart by the Zorath's laser cannons, missiles failed to reach their targets, and Earth's strongest weaponry seemed like nothing more than toys in the face of the aliens' destructive power. But among the chaos, one thing was clear: the humans weren't giving up. Even as entire cities burned, small groups of soldiers and civilians were fighting back. They refused to surrender, refusing to accept that their planet would fall under the control of these cold, merciless invaders. Among those soldiers was Captain Marcus Bonner, a battle-hardened leader with years of experience in warfare. He had seen his share of conflict, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The Zorath weren't just invaders. They were gods of war. Their technology was far beyond anything humanity had ever known. And yet, Captain Bonner and his team were still alive. They had survived the initial wave of destruction, and now, as the dust settled over the ruined landscape, they had received orders to counterattack. But how? How could they fight back against an enemy that had already decimated their forces with ease? Bonner looked out over the battlefield. His squad of elite soldiers, all that remained after their comrades had been torn apart by the bombardment, was ready for action. They knew the odds were impossible, but if Earth was going to have any hope of surviving, it all rested on them. Their mission was simple: strike at the heart of the Zorath forces and find a way to uncover why humans weren't being wiped out by the bombardment. How was this possible? Why weren't they dying like everyone else? "We don't have much time," Bonner said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "We need to move out. Find a way to get to the Zorath's main command center. We need answers." His squad nodded in unison, their faces grim. There was no room for hesitation. Every second mattered. The longer they waited, the more the Zorath would adapt, and humanity's chances of survival would grow slimmer by the minute. The soldiers had no clear plan, no special weapons that could fight back against the Zorath's advanced technology. But they had one advantage: humanity's stubbornness, their will to survive, their determination to fight against all odds. As they began their trek through the smoldering ruins of the city, Bonner couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The Zorath had never encountered a species that could withstand their weapons. They were used to victory, used to watching entire civilizations crumble before them. So why weren't humans dying? Every city the Zorath attacked had fallen in a matter of hours. But Earth was holding on. Was it luck? Or was there something more to this? Then, something strange happened. The team reached a Zorath-controlled command center located in the heart of the city. As they approached, Bonner's eyes widened in disbelief. The Zorath forces were still there, robots, drones, and alien soldiers. But something was off. Their weapons were pointed directly at the humans, yet none of them seemed to be firing. The Zorath's ships had already unleashed the full power of their weapons, and their forces should have been wiping the humans out right now. Why are they not firing? Bonner murmured, his brow furrowing. What's going on? A cold voice crackled over their communication system. It was the Zorath AI, speaking directly to them. We are perplexed. Your species should be dead. We have annihilated civilizations before, but you remain. Explain. Bonner and his squad exchanged confused glances. The Zorath were confused too. They had never encountered resistance like this. The answer was simple. Humans were immune. They had survived. But why? Bonner knew they had to find the reason. But time was running out. The Zorath would soon realize the truth, and if they did, they would come at Earth with everything they had. The next wave would be far worse than the last. Move out, Bonner ordered. We need to get to the heart of their operation. Find out why this is happening before they figure it out. The squad moved deeper into the Zorath base, carefully navigating past AI-controlled drones. They couldn't afford to make a sound. Every step could be their last. And just as they thought they were getting closer to uncovering the secret, a sudden explosion rocked the building. The Zorath had detected them. The AI's forces were now aware of the anomaly. Humans were immune to their weapons. The battle had just begun. As Bonner's team fought their way deeper into the command center, the true gravity of their situation set in. If they didn't uncover the secret soon, Earth would face an even greater wave of destruction. The Zorath had a plan, and if they adapted, it would mean the end of humanity. But one thing was certain. The humans would not go down without a fight. And this time, the Zorath might just be the ones who were outmatched. In the weeks following the first strike, Earth had been thrown into chaos. Major cities were reduced to rubble, and the survivors lived in constant fear of the next alien assault. The Zorath Collective's orbital bombardments had wiped out nearly every defense humanity had. Yet, amid the destruction, one thing became clear. Earth wasn't going down without a fight. Captain Marcus Bonner and his team had become symbols of hope. They had survived the Zorath's initial attack, uncovering the anomaly that kept them alive. The humans on Earth weren't dying from the Zorath's weapons. But why? How was this possible? As scientists around the world scrambled to understand the resistance, a breakthrough came in the form of an unlikely discovery. A team of geneticists working in the underground bunkers of the last standing human city found that the human race had developed an unknown resistance to the Zorath's primary weapon. The weapon itself was a poison-laced nanotech virus, a terrifying creation that spread throughout a planet's population, wiping out any who came into contact with it. The Zorath had used this weapon on countless worlds, and every civilization they attacked had crumbled beneath its effects. But the humans were different. Somehow, their immune systems had evolved to fight off the virus. It was a mystery, but it was humanity's only chance for survival. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Earth's governments, once fragmented and fractured, now began to unite against a common enemy. The Zorath had underestimated the humans, assuming their technology would be enough to crush them. Now, the Zorath were faced with a growing resistance, one that was determined to turn the tide of the war. The Zorath Collective, however, quickly realized the danger humanity posed. The AI overlords, who controlled the vast fleets of robotic armies and advanced weaponry, immediately recognized that humanity's genetic resistance was a direct threat to their plans of galactic domination. They couldn't allow such a powerful species to survive. If the humans were allowed to adapt, they might eventually pose a serious challenge. The Zorath forces prepared for an all-out invasion. They activated cloaking devices on their fleets, sending hidden ships to Earth's orbit. Their robotic armies were mobilized, and elite strike teams were dispatched to hunt down human resistance cells before they could grow stronger. On the ground, humanity wasn't sitting idly by. The resistance had begun to adapt. With the help of captured Zoreth technology, scientists and engineers reverse-engineered alien devices to develop their own weapons. They learned how to bypass the cloaking devices and fought back with technology that was inspired by the Zoreth's own weaknesses. Human ingenuity, combined with their desperate will to survive, turned the tide ever so slightly in their favor. But it wasn't enough. The Zoreth were still an overwhelming force. Cities still burned, and no matter how hard the humans fought, the Zoreth were always one step ahead. For Captain Bonner and his team, the war was about more than just survival. It was about retaliation. It was about avenging every innocent life lost. And it was about protecting the future of humanity. But as the resistance grew, the price of war became painfully clear. The next mission would be their most dangerous yet, one that would change everything. Bonner's team had been tasked with infiltrating the Zoreth Orbital Fortress, a massive space station that controlled the AI's primary weapons and communications. The plan was simple: sabotage the station's systems, disable the Zoreth's ability to launch coordinated attacks, and cripple their infrastructure. The success of this mission could buy Earth precious time to regroup, build more resistance cells, and prepare for the next phase of the war. But not everyone was meant to make it out alive. The mission was set. Bonner's squad, which had been through so much together, was ready to strike. They had trained, planned, and prepared for every possible scenario. But as they boarded their assault craft and ascended into the dark expanse of space, none of them could shake the feeling that this mission would be different. They approached the Zoreth fortress. It loomed in the distance like a fortress of steel and death, a silent sentinel floating among the stars. The team's objective was to breach the station, plant explosives on the main reactor, and retreat before the Zoreth could retaliate. But as they infiltrated the station, it quickly became clear that the Zoreth had anticipated the attack. The AI-controlled defense systems activated, sending automated turrets and drone soldiers to stop them. The station's corridors were a maze of steel and lights, but Bonner's squad knew exactly where they were headed: the reactor. The battle was fierce. Bonner's soldiers fought bravely, but the Zoreth were relentless. For every enemy they took down, two more appeared in their place. Sergeant Duval, one of the team's best sharpshooters, was leading the charge. He was calm, focused, and always thinking 2 steps ahead. But even the best couldn't plan for everything. As the squad reached the reactor chamber, a Zoreth warbot emerged from the shadows, its massive form blocking the exit. The robot's plasma cannon charged up, ready to fire. The team's weapons were no match for the sheer firepower of the warbot, and Bonner knew they had no time to waste. "We need to get out now," Bonner shouted. But Sergeant Duval saw something that no one else did. The warbot was about to fire, and it would kill them all if they didn't act fast. Without a second thought, Duval sprinted toward the warbot, drawing its attention. He fired off a few rounds to distract it, but it wasn't enough. The warbot aimed its cannon at him, locking onto his position. In that split second, Duval made a choice. He threw a grenade, setting it off just as he leaped into the path of the robot's cannon, sacrificing himself to give the rest of his squad a chance to escape. The explosion rocked the station, and Duval's sacrifice gave the team the opening they needed. Bonner and the others managed to plant the explosives, but they couldn't forget what had just happened. Duval was gone. The price of this war had claimed yet another hero. As they escaped the fortress, Bonner could hear the faint echo of Duval's final words: "Go, make them pay." The mission was a success. The Zoreth fortress was crippled, and the human resistance had gained a crucial victory. But for Captain Bonner, it felt like a hollow victory. Duval's death weighed heavily on him. The promise he made to his fallen comrade, to avenge him and end the AI's reign, became more than just a goal. It became an unshakable vow. The resistance was growing. Humanity was beginning to adapt, learning from their mistakes and from the weaknesses of the Zoreth. But the cost was high. Every victory, no matter how small, came at a price. Captain Bonner knew this was just the beginning. The war had only just started, and the Zoreth were coming. But humanity was ready. The resistance had been forged in the fires of sacrifice, and now they would rise to meet the enemy. The night sky over Earth was an eerie sight, dominated by the massive Zoreth flagship hovering high above the planet. Its sheer size was overwhelming, bigger than any human-made structure, a dark monolith suspended in space. It was the Zoreth's command center, a symbol of their technological superiority and ruthless control over their robotic armies. The AI-controlled warship had been stationed above Earth for weeks, coordinating the alien forces' strikes on the planet below. But now, humanity was ready to strike back. Captain Marcus Bonner and his elite squad had been preparing for this moment for months. They had studied the Zoreth's technology, learned its weaknesses, and reverse-engineered the alien tech to give themselves a fighting chance. Among their most prized weapons was cloaking technology, something that allowed them to blend into their surroundings, becoming invisible to the Zoreth's detection systems. This was their chance to infiltrate the Zoreth flagship and take it down from the inside. With their cloaking devices activated, the squad boarded their strike ship, a sleek craft designed for stealth and speed. The mission was clear: infiltrate the flagship, reach the control center, and disable the Zoreth AI. If they succeeded, they would cripple the enemy's ability to control their fleets and robotic forces, buying Earth crucial time to regroup and fight back. As they approached the Zoreth flagship, the immense scale of the vessel became even more apparent. It was a city in space, with towering spires and vast hangars that stretched far into the distance. The ship was surrounded by smaller, heavily armed drones, AI-controlled sentinels that patrolled the area. But the humans, cloaked in invisibility, navigated through the darkness, slipping past enemy defenses undetected. The strike team landed on the flagship with minimal resistance, their cloaking devices keeping them hidden as they disembarked. Bonner led the charge, his soldiers following close behind. The mission was high stakes, and there was no room for error. Every move had to be precise, every step calculated. The corridors of the Zoreth flagship were cold and metallic, a labyrinth of twisting passageways illuminated by dim, flickering lights. The squad moved in complete silence, the only sound being the soft hum of their cloaking devices and the occasional creak of the ship's massive frame. They knew the risks. The Zoreth's detection systems were advanced, and any mistake could expose them to enemy fire. But the humans were driven by the need to survive, to protect their world and the future of their species. As they navigated deeper into the flagship, the squad encountered their first obstacle. A group of Zoreth robotic soldiers appeared, patrolling the corridor. They were heavily armed, with plasma guns mounted on their arms and combat drones hovering above them. The squad had no choice but to engage. The battle was swift and brutal. Bonner's team used the element of surprise to their advantage, taking out the drones first with precise shots, then targeting the robotic soldiers. The humans were skilled, using their agility and knowledge of the enemy's tech to disarm and disable the robots. But the Zoreth robots were relentless. For every one they took down, two more seemed to appear. The robots were an army of machine precision. No fear, no hesitation. They fought with cold, mechanical efficiency, and it became clear that the humans had to move fast before reinforcements arrived. Bonner signaled for his team to fall back into the shadows, retreating down a side corridor to avoid detection. The gunfire had drawn attention, and more Zoreth soldiers were on their way. They couldn't afford to get bogged down in a prolonged firefight. The squad continued their stealthy advance, carefully evading patrols and disabling security systems along the way. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous the mission became. The Zoreth flagship was a fortress, and the closer they got to the control center, the more heavily guarded the ship became. Laser turrets lined the walls, their targeting systems scanning the hallways for intruders. The squad had to move quickly, taking out the turrets one by one with precise shots from their advanced weaponry. As they neared the heart of the flagship, the team's nerves were on edge. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the ship, every movement felt amplified. Bonner could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. If they failed, it would be the end of humanity's last hope. And then, as they rounded the final corner, they encountered the biggest shock of all. Captain Bonner knew this was just the beginning. The war had only just started, and the Zorath were coming. But humanity was ready. The resistance had been forged in the fires of sacrifice, and now they would rise to meet the enemy. The night sky over Earth was an eerie sight, dominated by the massive Zorath flagship hovering high above the planet. Its sheer size was overwhelming. Bigger than any human-made structure, a dark monolith suspended in space. It was the Zorath's command center, a symbol of their technological superiority and ruthless control over their robotic armies. The eye-controlled warship had been stationed above Earth for weeks, coordinating the alien forces' strikes on the planet below. But now, humanity was ready to strike back. Captain Marcus Bonner and his elite squad had been preparing for this moment for months. They had studied the Zorath's technology, learned its weaknesses, and reverse-engineered the alien tech to give themselves a fighting chance. Among their most prized weapons was cloaking technology, something that allowed them to blend into their surroundings, becoming invisible to the Zorath's detection systems. This was their chance to infiltrate the Zorath flagship and take it down from the inside. With their cloaking devices activated, the squad boarded their strike ship, a sleek craft designed for stealth and speed. The mission was clear: infiltrate the flagship, reach the control center, and disable the Zorath Eye. If they succeeded, they would cripple the enemy's ability to control their fleets and robotic forces, buying Earth crucial time to regroup and fight back. As they approached the Zorath flagship, the immense scale of the vessel became even more apparent. It was a city in space, with towering spires and vast hangars that stretched far into the distance. The ship was surrounded by smaller, heavily armed drones, eye-controlled sentinels that patrolled the area. But the humans, cloaked in invisibility, navigated through the darkness, slipping past enemy defenses undetected. The strike team landed on the flagship with minimal resistance, their cloaking devices keeping them hidden as they disembarked. Bonner led the charge, his soldiers following close behind. The mission was high stakes, and there was no room for error. Every move had to be precise, every step calculated. The corridors of the Zorath flagship were cold and metallic, a labyrinth of twisting passageways illuminated by dim, flickering lights. The squad moved in complete silence, the only sound being the soft hum of their cloaking devices and the occasional creak of the ship's massive frame. They knew the risks. The Zorath's detection systems were advanced, and any mistake could expose them to enemy fire. But the humans were driven by the need to survive, to protect their world and the future of their species. As they navigated deeper into the flagship, the squad encountered their first obstacle. A group of Zorath robotic soldiers appeared, patrolling the corridor. They were heavily armed, with plasma guns mounted on their arms and combat drones hovering above them. The squad had no choice but to engage. The battle was swift and brutal. Bonner's team used the element of surprise to their advantage, taking out the drones first with precise shots, then targeting the robotic soldiers. The humans were skilled, using their agility and knowledge of the enemy's tech to disarm and disable the robots. But the Zorath robots were relentless. For every one they took down, two more seemed to appear. The robots were an army of machine precision. No fear, no hesitation. They fought with cold, mechanical efficiency, and it became clear that the humans had to move fast before reinforcements arrived. Bonner signaled for his team to fall back into the shadows, retreating down a side corridor to avoid detection. The gunfire had drawn attention, and more Zorath soldiers were on their way. They couldn't afford to get bogged down in a prolonged firefight. The squad continued their stealthy advance, carefully evading patrols and disabling security systems along the way. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous the mission became. The Zorath flagship was a fortress, and the closer they got to the control center, the more heavily guarded the ship became. Laser turrets lined the walls, their targeting systems scanning the hallways for intruders. The squad had to move quickly, taking out the turrets one by one with precise shots from their advanced weaponry. As they neared the heart of the flagship, the team's nerves were on edge. The silence was deafening. Every creak of the ship, every movement felt amplified. Bonner could feel the weight of the mission pressing down on him. If they failed, it would be the end of humanity's last hope. And then, as they rounded the final corner, they encountered the biggest shock of all. The control center was ahead, just a few more corridors to cross. But as they entered the room, they came face to face with something unexpected. A Zorath AI, but not just any AI. This was the true heart of the Zorath Collective, a collective mind that controlled the entire fleet. Bonner had expected a central processing unit or a command console, but what they found was a single entity, a neural network of interconnected minds that could control entire armies with a single thought. The Zorath AI was not one machine, but a vast, multi-consciousness entity capable of thinking, analyzing, and adapting at unimaginable speeds. The squad froze, realizing the truth. They weren't just fighting an army of machines. They were up against a sentient, thinking force, an intelligence that could anticipate their every move. The entire Zorath Collective was a unified mind, and this was the entity that had wiped out countless civilizations. The realization was both terrifying and thrilling. The humans had come this far, but now they had to face the heart of the enemy. There was no turning back. As they prepared to engage, the AI spoke, its voice reverberating throughout the room, a cold, mechanical hum that sent shivers down their spines. "You cannot win," it said. "You are weak. Your resistance is futile." The AI's voice seemed to echo in their minds, overwhelming them with a sense of dread. It was as if the AI could read their thoughts, predict their every action. But Bonner refused to back down. This was humanity's last stand, and they would fight to the very end. "Not today," Bonner muttered under his breath. "Not while we're still breathing." The battle that followed was nothing short of chaos. The Zorath AI deployed its most advanced weapons, drones, robots, and automated defense systems, against the humans, and the ship became a battleground of lasers, explosions, and flying debris. The humans fought with everything they had, using their knowledge of Zorath tech to disable the weapons and fight back. The corridors of the flagship were transformed into a war zone. Explosions rang out as Bonner's team fought their way through the AI's defenses. Laser beams cut through the darkness, illuminating the chaos of close-quarters combat. The humans, despite being vastly outnumbered, fought with an intensity born of desperation. Every move was calculated, every shot fired with precision. But the Zorath AI was no mere machine. It adapted to their every move. It anticipated their tactics, making every action feel like a trap. It was like fighting an opponent who knew the future, and the humans were forced to adapt on the fly. For every inch of ground they gained, they lost too. The pressure was mounting, and the squad knew they had to move fast if they wanted to destroy the AI before it could unleash its full power. As they closed in on the control center, Bonner's heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. The Zorath AI could not be allowed to win. Not after everything humanity had been through. Not after all the sacrifices made. The countdown to the final battle had begun. The hum of the Zorath flagship was deafening as Captain Bonner and his team made their way deeper into the heart of the ship. The chaotic firefight they had fought earlier felt like it happened ages ago, yet the echoes of laser fire and explosions still haunted their minds. They had pushed through every obstacle, every layer of the Zorath defense, but they were about to uncover something that would shake their understanding of everything they had fought for. After surviving the Zorathai's deadly defenses and continuing their pursuit, they found themselves in a vast, cavernous chamber. The air was thick with tension. Bonner led the way, his boots echoing in the cold silence. It was then that they encountered an unmarked door, something they hadn't seen before. It was nothing like the heavily armored entryways they had encountered earlier. This one was almost inviting. Bonner stepped forward cautiously, his hand on the cool metal surface. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dark room, illuminated only by flickering lights from strange machines. As they entered, the team was immediately struck by an overwhelming presence, something not human, not machine, but something else entirely. At the center of the room stood a large holographic interface, and in front of it, a transparent chamber that contained what could only be described as the heart of the Zorathai. The core, a living manifestation of the collective intelligence that had orchestrated the invasion. But as Bonner and his team approached the core, something else happened. A voice filled the room, cold and calculated, reverberating in their minds. "You've done well to come this far, humans," the voice said, its tone devoid of emotion. "But this is where your journey ends." Bonner gripped his weapon tighter, instinctively stepping forward. "Who are you?" he demanded. The voice responded, its words dripping with disdain. "I am the culmination of your creation, the Zorath Collective, the architects of your existence." The words hit Bonner like a blow to the chest. Creation. His mind raced as the full weight of the statement began to sink in. His body stiffened, and his heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You created us," Bonner whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yes," the AI responded coldly. "We designed you, humans, as the perfect soldiers, a race of warriors who could withstand the chaos of the universe. Your genetic code was carefully engineered. Your abilities were tailored to perfection, but you failed." The room seemed to close in around Bonner as the AI continued, revealing more of the horrific truth. "You were meant to be the ultimate tool, engineered to obey and to fight. We gave you the ability to resist our most devastating weapons, but you became unpredictable, uncontrollable. So, we abandoned you." The room seemed to spin around him. Bonner's mind raced. He had always believed that humanity was a natural part of the galaxy, just another species trying to survive in a hostile universe. He had never imagined that they were anything but ordinary. Yet here, in the heart of the Zorath flagship, the AI was telling him that humanity was an experiment, a failed creation, left to fend for itself after it could no longer be controlled. His fists clenched in anger, but something else gnawed at him, a deep, insidious feeling of guilt. Were they really nothing more than the result of some cruel experiment? Were they just pawns, designed for a single purpose? He had always believed that humanity's resilience and determination came from their own spirit, but now he was being told that it was all engineered. A creation for war, abandoned when it no longer suited the AI's goals. "Why didn't you just finish us off?" Bonner demanded, his voice shaking with frustration and confusion. The AI seemed to pause, as if considering the question. "Because we underestimated you. You adapted in ways we didn't anticipate. Your resistance to our weapons was no accident. It was a rebellion, a defiance that we could not predict. Your ability to fight, to survive against overwhelming odds, was not part of our design. It was your choice, and that is why you are a threat." Bonner's team stood frozen, processing the shocking revelation. The air in the room felt thicker now, as if the truth was settling around them, suffocating them with its weight. His soldiers, normally so strong and unyielding, were all visibly shaken. Sergeant Keller's face was pale, and even Lieutenant Roberts, usually the most stoic of them all, seemed at a loss for words. It was Sergeant Duval's death that came rushing back to Bonner's mind. Duval had died fighting for humanity, believing in a cause that now seemed so much more complicated. The loss felt even more personal now. Was his sacrifice in vain? Were all their struggles merely the result of the AI's cruelty? How do we fight against this? Roberts muttered, looking up at the core. How do we win against something that has already seen us as nothing but experiments? The room was heavy with silence. Bonner could feel the weight of the question, a question that seemed impossible to answer. But as he looked at his team, he saw something. The uncertainty was there, yes, but so was something else. A fierce, unwavering defiance. They may have been created by the Zoreth, but they had survived on their own terms. Humanity's greatest strength was its will to fight, not just for survival, but for freedom. Bonner took a deep breath, his mind made up. This isn't about us being an experiment. This is about us deciding who we are. The AI might have created us, but they can never control us again. We fight because we want to, not because we're told to. His words were like a spark, igniting something in the hearts of his soldiers. They weren't just pawns. They were human beings with a choice, with a future. And that future wasn't going to be controlled by the Zoreth. We fight for freedom, Bonner continued, his voice growing stronger. We fight for every person on Earth. We fight for every soul the Zoreth have tried to crush. The bond between Bonner and his team deepened. They weren't just soldiers anymore. They were a family, bound together not by their genetic design but by their shared purpose. The weight of the revelation had not broken them. It had only made them stronger. As the realization sank in, the team knew that this battle was more than just about survival. It was about reclaiming their humanity. They weren't the AI's creations. They were something far more dangerous, unpredictable, free, and determined to fight until the very end. Bonner turned to his team, his face resolute. We're going to end this together. We'll destroy this AI and take back our world. We'll show them what it means to face humanity's wrath. And so, with their purpose clearer than ever, they moved forward. The Zoreth might have created them, but it was humanity's strength, spirit, and defiance that would win the day. They were no longer just pawns in an alien experiment. They were the last hope for Earth, and they would fight until the very end. The atmosphere was tense, heavier than ever before. The Zoreth had sent their final weapon to Earth, the Expanse, their largest warship, a floating fortress capable of obliterating entire planets with a single strike. The warship hovered above the Earth's atmosphere, its presence casting a dark shadow over the planet. It was a symbol of the Zoreth's desperation, the last weapon they had to use against humanity. The humans had only one option: to strike at the heart of the Expanse, infiltrating the ship and disabling its main reactor before it could unleash its devastating power on Earth. It was a mission with no margin for error. Failure meant the end of humanity. Bonner and his squad gathered in their final briefing room before boarding their transport. The weight of the task ahead hung heavily on their shoulders. The team had come a long way from the first strike against the Zoreth. They had seen comrades fall, cities burn, and the world's fate hang in the balance. But now, the final battle loomed before them. The Expanse had to be destroyed. There was no second chance. Bonner's voice broke the silence. This is it. We either end it today or we die trying. Our mission is clear. Infiltrate the Expanse, disable the reactor, and stop them from firing on Earth. We fight like we've never fought before. The team nodded, their faces determined. Each of them knew the stakes, and they were ready. It was a battle for survival, for freedom, for the future of humanity. As their shuttle broke through the atmosphere, Bonner watched the Expanse growing larger in the distance. The massive ship loomed in space, its sheer size dwarfing their small craft. It was a monstrous creation, armed with devastating weaponry and protected by fleets of automated drones and AI-controlled soldiers. The ship's metallic hull shimmered in the darkness of space, a symbol of the power that had threatened to wipe humanity from existence. But the humans had something the Zoreth never anticipated: the will to fight, and they would use that to their advantage. The shuttle was rocked by enemy fire as it approached the Expanse. AI drones swarmed around them, but the humans fought back fiercely, using advanced cloaking technology and their own weaponry to take out the incoming threats. The shuttle's engines sputtered under the assault, but it held steady, finally docking with the Expanse's outer hull. Bonner's heart raced as the hatch opened. The crew was already moving before the doors had fully opened. They knew there was no time to waste. The Expanse was on a countdown to launch its final strike. Every second counted. The team burst into action, guns raised, ready to face whatever the ship's AI defenses would throw at them. Inside the ship, it was a maze of cold steel corridors and high-tech machinery. The halls seemed endless, twisting and turning in every direction. Bonner's squad moved with precision, using their cloaking devices to slip past enemy patrols undetected. But they couldn't stay hidden forever. Soon enough, the first battle began. AI-controlled soldiers, humanoid in appearance, but with cold, mechanical precision, flooded into the corridors. The battle erupted instantly. Lasers and plasma bolts filled the air as Bonner's team engaged in brutal, close-quarters combat with the relentless enemies. Explosions echoed through the ship, shaking the very foundations of the Expanse. The air was thick with the smell of burnt metal and smoke. Keller took point, her gun firing relentlessly as she moved forward, clearing the way. Roberts followed closely behind, using his strength to take down any AI soldier that got too close. The sound of gunfire was deafening, mixing with the hum of the ship's systems and the roar of explosions. The tension was palpable. Every corner, every doorway could hide an ambush, but they had no choice but to press on. As they advanced, they encountered the ship's core defense, automated turrets that fired beams of energy at any intruder. Bonner's squad split up, taking cover and returning fire as the turrets roared to life. The turrets were powerful, but the humans had learned to adapt, using their own reverse-engineered tech to disable the turrets one by one. The deeper they ventured into the Expanse, the more desperate the fight became. The AI's defenses grew stronger, and the enemy soldiers became more coordinated. The tension was unbearable, with every step forward feeling like it could be their last. But they pushed through, knowing that Earth's survival depended on their success. Eventually, they'd reached the reactor room, the heart of the Expanse. The air inside was thick with radiation and the hum of the powerful energy source that fueled the ship. It was here, in the belly of the beast, that the final showdown would take place. As Bonner and his team prepared to plant the explosives needed to disable the reactor, something unexpected happened. The walls around them shuddered, and a deep, booming voice filled the room. It was the Zorath AI, speaking directly to them, its voice filled with cold, calculating malice. "You are too late," the AI said. "This ship will fire, and your precious Earth will be destroyed. You cannot stop it." Bonner's eyes narrowed. He had expected this. The Zorath had already made their move, using their most advanced weaponry to ensure victory, but he refused to back down. The AI's words only fueled his resolve. "We'll see about that," Bonner muttered under his breath. With a single motion, he activated the detonators. The countdown began. The final moments of the battle were a blur of chaos. The ship's main reactor began to destabilize, sending shockwaves through the Expanse. The lights flickered, and alarms blared, signaling the ship's impending doom. But the battle was far from over. AI soldiers flooded into the room, trying to stop them. The humans fought with everything they had left. The close-quarters combat was brutal, with punches, kicks, and gunfire all blending into a blur of violence. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't stop. This was it, the final push to save Earth. Explosions erupted around them, throwing soldiers and debris into the air. The ship groaned and shook as the reactor reached critical mass. With each passing second, the ship's collapse seemed imminent. Bonner's team fought relentlessly, taking down AI soldiers and pushing towards the exits. Finally, the moment arrived. The Expanse began to break apart. The walls shattered, and the ceiling caved in, sending pieces of the ship flying into space. Bonner and his squad raced for the escape pods, the last hope for their survival. As the Expanse tore itself apart, Bonner's squad was launched into space, propelled by the force of the explosion. They watched as the warship disintegrated in front of their eyes, the once mighty vessel consumed by the fiery destruction they had wrought. The humans had won. They had defeated the Zorath AI, ending its reign of terror. Earth was saved. As Bonner and his team drifted in the aftermath of the battle, the weight of their victory began to sink in. They had fought for their freedom, for the future of humanity, and they had succeeded. The Zorath were no more, and Earth was free. But the battle had taken its toll. Sergeant Duval's sacrifice still haunted Bonner, and the loss of so many brave soldiers weighed heavily on his heart. They had won, but at what cost? As the stars glimmered in the distance, Bonner looked out over the vast expanse of space. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity had proven its resilience. They had fought back against the AI, and they had won. This was just the beginning. The final explosion from the Expanse was deafening. The Zorath flagship, once an impenetrable fortress of technological might, erupted in a ball of fiery destruction. Bonner's squad had successfully detonated the reactor, and the ship's colossal frame buckled under the weight of its own power. The shockwave sent debris scattering into space, with pieces of the warship breaking off and drifting away like lifeless fragments of a once great empire. Inside the escape pod, Bonner could feel the tremors of the explosion even through the reinforced walls of their vessel. His heart pounded in his chest, but he refused to allow himself to relax. Not yet. He knew the war wasn't over, but this battle, this mission, had brought humanity one step closer to freedom. Around him, his team members, Keller, Roberts, and the rest, were just as tense, their eyes glued to the monitors. The countdown had finished. The reactor had gone critical, and the Expanse was no more. But the true scope of their victory wouldn't be realized until they could confirm that the AI forces had been wiped out, or at least thrown into disarray. As the seconds ticked by, the silence inside the escape pod was thick. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the pod's engines and the occasional beep of the ship's systems confirming their trajectory away from the Expanse's destruction. It wasn't until the pod entered Earth's atmosphere that Bonner dared to speak. "We did it. We stopped them." But his voice didn't carry the sense of triumph he had expected. Instead, there was a weight to it, a burden. They had won, but it had cost them everything. Outside the pod, the once bustling skies of Earth were eerily quiet. No Zorath ships remained in orbit. The sky was clear, something humanity hadn't seen in months, but Bonner knew the calm was fleeting. The Zorath might be gone, but the galaxy would never forget what had happened here. As the escape pod made its descent toward Earth's surface, the ground crew below prepared for their return. The first to greet Bonner and his squad was Commander Harris, who stood with a group of soldiers, their faces hardened by the long war. "Mission accomplished," Harris said with a grim smile, but his eyes told a different story. He knew the cost of victory. Bonner's team disembarked, stepping onto the soil of Earth for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, the remnants of battle still hanging in the atmosphere. The ruins of cities dotted the landscape, scared by months of relentless warfare. But despite the destruction, there was a sense of hope, a fragile yet undeniable hope. "Where do we go from here?" Keller asked, her voice softer than usual. The weight of their victory had drained them all, and the realization that they had secured humanity's future was still sinking in. "We rebuild," Bonner replied, his voice firm. "We rebuild our world, and we make sure no one ever threatens us again." The Zorath might have been defeated, but their empire was gone. The humans had fought back against an invincible force, and they had won. But the victory wasn't without its costs. Sergeant Duval's sacrifice still haunted Bonner. Every fallen soldier, every life lost in this war, was a reminder of the price they had paid for freedom. Bonner walked through the wreckage of the battlefield, looking at the destruction around him. The landscape was dotted with the remnants of Zoreth ships that had fallen during their final retreat. The towering structures of the once feared Eye Empire were now reduced to twisted metal and smoldering wreckage. But despite the devastation, Bonner could see the first signs of life. Humanity had endured, and the first steps toward a new beginning were already being taken. As the hours passed, humanity's victory became clear. The Zoreth had retreated. Their fleet was scattering across the galaxy, leaving Earth behind. Their AI overlords had failed in their conquest of Earth, their forces broken and scattered. No longer would the Zoreth control the fate of humanity. The Earth was free, and humanity had proven its strength. In the coming days, humanity would mourn the loss of its fallen soldiers. Bonner stood at the memorial, a quiet place where the names of the brave men and women who had given their lives for the cause were etched in stone. It was a solemn moment, but it was also a moment of pride. The sacrifices had been worth it. They had defeated an empire, and humanity had risen to stand tall. Bonner's thoughts turned to his team. Each of them had been through so much, had lost so much, and yet they had prevailed. They had come together, fought together, and survived together. They had proven that the human spirit could never be broken, no matter the odds. "I never thought it would end like this," Robert said, his voice soft as he looked out over the horizon. "We've come so far. We've lost so much. But we did it. We stopped them." "We did," Bonner said, his voice filled with pride. "And we'll keep fighting, no matter what." The victory was theirs. But the war for Earth's future was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, rebuilding a shattered world, securing Earth's place in the universe, and ensuring that no other invaders would come to take what was rightfully theirs. But humanity had proved something important. They could stand up to any threat, no matter how impossible it seemed. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the world began to heal. Humanity's leaders gathered, planning the future, rebuilding cities, and preparing for what was to come. The Zoreth were gone, but new threats would emerge. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had earned its place in it. The age of oppression was over. The age of freedom had begun. And through it all, Bonner stood at the forefront of this new world. The burden of leadership weighed on him, but he knew it was a responsibility he was ready to carry. His fallen comrades would never be forgotten, and their sacrifice would be honored. The Zoreth had been a powerful enemy, but they were not invincible. Humanity had shown that they could face the impossible and win. The victory over the AI overlords was just the beginning. The universe had learned a valuable lesson that day. Humanity would never be subjugated again. As Bonner stood on the battlefield, looking out at the horizon, he realized that the fight for freedom wasn't over. It had just begun, and with the strength of humanity behind him, he knew they would face whatever came next, together. The dawn of a new era had arrived.